Our topic today is retirement strategy. So what are some of the biggest financial risks that retirees face as they enter retirement? I want to start with you, Laura, but Kimberly looks like she's about to burst. So Kimberly, you go ahead and jump in.
So besides the obvious ones of inflation and outliving your money before you get your phone call from heaven, the ability for your earnings capacity to earn money on your assets and in a declining market. That's a really big factor for retirees. So First Trust did a survey from 1926 until 2017, and the average bull market was about 9 years. The average bear market was about 1.4 years, but the average decline in a bear market was 41%. So it's really critical that retirees address the risk tolerance that they have, that they can actually stomach and stay invested in the market.
Yeah, and I like to call that 4 years before retirement and the 4 years after retirement the Achilles heel of a person's financial life cycle, because they are very vulnerable then to a market correction. And the best way to drive that point home to an investor is to say, hey, Jane and Joe, you've got $1 million portfolio, and you are, let's say, 60% exposed to the stock market. And because of that, it's not if, it's when the market corrects, you are likely to experience up to a 27% decline in your portfolio. Now, that means you just lost $270,000 and you're down to $730,000. How do you feel about that? And that drives the point home, and it certainly makes them concerned because they might not have the ability to live the retirement life they really desired.
That's a great point. Well, Ellen, I know you can add to that on the emotional aspect as well.
Yeah, so there's risks that you can control and there's risks you can't control. We can't control what happens in the stock market. We can't control what happens with, can control when you decide to retire, how much money that you spend in retirement. And then there's also thinking about the emotional risks. It is a huge transition for people to move from being accumulators, adding to their savings, to starting to spend their money. And I think that's underestimated for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right about that. And we talked about the Achilles heel period, so that brings me to kind of a follow-up question, which is, when should people be addressing this? You talked about the 4 years before and after, Laura. Is it too soon to start thinking about retirement?
No, not at all. I mean, obviously we should be thinking about retirement way before that because we have to aggressively be saving for retirement. But about that 4 or 5 year period before they retire is when they should be thinking about de-risking. So for example, if that same couple had a 60-40 portfolio, 60% exposure to the stock market and 40% to the bond market, we might be thinking about de-risking up to 20 percentage points. So maybe down to a 40-60, particularly if they're like, wow, I don't want to lose $270,000 in a market correction.
So those might be things they do maybe 5 years out, Kimberly.
Right, right. You definitely do address this early and often. And one of the things that I often recommend is to work with your advisor before, right? So meet with them 5 years before. Start talking about the bucket list that you want to do and what that's going to look like, right? And then also looking at the portfolio. You want to make sure that the investments are actually commensurate with your ability to take risk in the market and stay in the market. It's just really hard, not that you can't move, but it's really hard to time the market. So you need to be able to stay through those ups and downs and have a cognitive decline plan in place prior to using it, right? So when the market does decline, because it will at some point in our lifetime, right? Again and again, we want to have a plan that we can go to so we're not acting out of emotion, we're not acting out of intellectual decision-making process so that we have that wealth well into our 90s.